Hi guys, welcome. Let's continue with more Qigong conversation and Taoism. Okay, first question from Lauren 6448. Hey Lauren, thank you very much, Adam Chan, for answering my question. You're welcome. I apologize for my impatience in seeking the answer you just gave. No need to apologize. I think I remember this episode he's referring to. I've been searching for 4 years. It's the bodily condition and cause a lot of discomfort and fears. Constantly spiral into the worst. Especially thank you for providing some guidance regarding the time to devote to practice. Indeed, my mind's going crazy, and I am always carried away despite myself. I don't know how to deal with that either. If you'd like to say a little bit more about this, please do. Otherwise, I haven't found any good teachers in this area. I'll look into what you offer and see if I can afford it. Okay. Lauren, first of all, thank you for your question. I do remember talking to you before. Now that I remember your name and also some of the things we talked about. We talked about filling the lower center because you were feeling fatigue, and we talked about anxiety. You want me to talk a little bit about the mind going crazy because I don't know your profile and I don't know you personally. It would be irresponsible for me to start going off and talking about that. I don't have enough information to go on how your life is. So what I'm going to do is just generalize it and also talk about my own experience, and hopefully some of it will help you. If not, leave another question, be more specific, and we can continue the conversation in the future. When I was really sick 5 years ago, I felt like my mind was going crazy because I couldn't control it. I had brain fog. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't really speak coherently sometimes. Like I would just lose my train of thought in the middle of it. I couldn't count to 20, for example. So, they were looking at it depending on a doctor, because I went to so many different disciplines of medicine, East and West, and they were saying I have PTSD, post concussion therapy, anxiety, depression, overtraining syndrome, stage 4. So, depending on low chi, so depending on the doctor I was talking to, they were telling me I have these different causes, although none of them can figure out how to fix me. And eventually, what healed me, of course, was Qigong. Now, I was feeling like there were needles in my skin all over my head, needles. And then as soon as I try to think intentively, right here, I remember, used to get very hot. Like I'll be like, whoa. And then back here, I'll start to feel like there's more needles. And then if I don't stop and I force myself, I discipline myself to keep thinking about something or to solve a problem or trying to count to 20 or whatever the therapist was trying to get me to do at the time, because I was throwing up and I was dizzy. I was losing fine motor skill. Yeah, in the previous episode I talked about it, so I was really sick. If I force my way through it with willpower, what usually happen is I start getting really, really dizzy. And then sometimes I would want to pass out, right? So that was the first year. By the second year, if I force it, not only do I feel needles on my skin or heating in my head and feeling dizzy, I'll start having panic attacks. And then by the third year, I started Qigong. And by the 3.5 years, I was pretty much fully 80% recovered. And by the fourth year, I was fully recovered, which is 2 years in Qigong. So 2 years I was really sick. 2 years in Qigong, I was fully recovered. In the last 3 years, I'm fully recovered. Now I just do it because I enjoy it. So that's what I was going through. I couldn't even focus. Forget about the anxiety coming through later. Like I couldn't even focus on counting, right? So the first thing I want to say to you is when I listen to your question, I can't help but think you feel discouraged, and so did I. But I just want to say, if you kind of look for a good teacher in practice, for me, I got very lucky. I got fully recovered, right? But I never thought like I can't do it, because I knew if I allow myself to think like that, I'll never get fixed, right? So try to, I know this is easier said than done, but try not to judge yourself in a way that's cast in stone. Like, I'm finished, I'm done, I can't do this. Like, that is unnecessary. It's already bad enough that we're sick. It's worse if we judge ourselves for it, right? So just Move that aside. But that said, any type of work when I was that mentally weak and physically weak, I was physically really weak. I couldn't even walk a mile or half a mile. I couldn't even walk from here to my refrigerator without feeling dizzy that year. I was so sick. When you're that weak mentally and physically, the idea of using willpower and discipline to force your way through something is very stupid. I know that's very popular in the self-help industry, but it doesn't work when you're that weak. Any type of doing work, like, oh, count your breath, focus on a candle, breathe like this, breathe like that. Any kind of doing practice didn't work for me either. I was so weak mentally and physically, there was no way I could focus on something because that required mental strength and physical strength because I had to keep my posture. And I didn't have any mental or physical strength. That's why I was seeking healing in the first place, right? That's why I was lucky when I fell right into original Taoism, which is based on not doing, not focusing, not chasing. No technique, no stages, no method. That's the promise of original Taoism. And luckily, I started to do that. So, how I fixed my mind of focusing is you don't really focus. The first thing we did was, I think I talked about this in a few episodes, but I can walk you through it again. If you can't do static work because you're so mentally and physically shaky, like I was, the core of the practice, the most powerful stuff of the entire practice is in the static work, not the movement. But because I was so weak, I couldn't do static work. I started with movement work. And movement work is the easiest way to get someone to the point where they can actually do qigong or meditate or to be still, to achieve a stillness of mind. And the movement work has to be done in a way that generates power. Because at the time, I mean, there was a lot of, if you just go online, if you go to a park in Chinatown, you see people doing movement work all the time. But as I said a couple episodes back, I forgot which episode, just doing movements doesn't really help anybody because it doesn't generate any chi, doesn't generate any energy. It has to be done with internal mechanics. That's the first thing. The second thing, once that's dialed in and you're starting to get some juice when you're doing energy work, is that it has to be spontaneous. But one thing before the other, right? Once you get to the spontaneous movement level, not the shaky stuff, but the smooth stuff, you got to start feeling juice. You got to start feeling mental clarity, mental strength, and physical strength. Not a lot, but enough that you feel smooth. Like you're not shaking all the time. I wasn't getting panic attack all the time. I can finally count to 1 to 20. Really basic stuff. I can stand a little bit without throwing up. So that was really encouraging for me to get that basic strength back. And it was hurtful to my pride because I was used to being a martial artist. Like I was punching, I was kicking, I was using knives, I was using swords, I was doing two-man drills, I was doing pressure testing. All of a sudden I can't even walk. Or all of a sudden I can't, and I wrote 4 books, but all of a sudden I can't even count to 20 or form a complete sentence. So that really hurt my self-esteem, right? But again, non-judgment, non-attachment, no clinging, the basic precepts of Buddhism and Taoism. So I just moved that aside. And based on a spontaneous movement, it got to the point where I was physically and mentally strong enough to attempt to stand still. So that's the next thing. As you're standing still, when we talked about this a lot, it's a vertical relationship like a plant where you're going this way and this way, not a horizontal relationship. Although that's also trained, it's probably only 10 or 20% of it. You feel like a tree. That's why it's called standing like a tree. As you do that, you start getting even more power, a lot more than if you're moving, right? But at that point, a good teacher will show you how to sit in a chair so your leg roots to the ground and you rotate between standing practices and sitting in a chair practice with the mechanics being almost identical. That way you don't tax your legs too much because I was too weak to stand for an hour at that point. So I'll stand for 10 minutes, then I'll sit for 10 minutes, then I'll stand for 10 minutes. Once you work it up to about 45 minutes to an hour, at that point, for most people, and definitely for me that year, I remember my brain fog went away. The needles I was feeling in my head went away. The heat in the back of my head went away where I got hit. And I was able to talk again. I was able to speak in full sentences. I was able to count to 20. I was starting to get mental clarity. And a lot of people take that for granted, like your mind going crazy, or you can't pay attention, or you can't focus, or you can't speak. A lot of our mental fog, our mental discomfort, our emotional discomfort is directly connected to the amount of energy you have physically. The body influences the mind, and the mind influences the body. We shouldn't separate it like we do in the West, where, all right, spirituality is over here on this corner, physical development is over here on this corner, and mental development is over here in this corner. So on Monday, I go to the gym and lift weights. On Tuesday, I see my shrink. And on Friday, I go to the church. Everything is separated. That's a very dumb way to attempt healing because, well, the result speaks for itself. 68% of people in BC right now has depression, anxiety, high blood pressure. It goes on. My province is a mess right now. The health crisis is crazy. It shouldn't be like that. It has to be holistic. Your mind influences your body, and your body influences your mind. This is your body center, your healing emotional center, and your spiritual center. They're all in one highway, your central channel. So how could you possibly rip it apart and separate it? So you try not to look at your problems as mental and physical. They're in one channel from a TCM and also from a very specifically Taoist and Buddhist point of view. And Hinduism point of view. They're in one channel. So you start with this one, physical, more emotional, and more spiritual, right? But they're all one movement, if you will. If you look at it like that, then you go from movement to standing still to sitting in a chair. Later on, when you get even more energy, and then you start sitting the way I am in a lotus position or in a kneeling bench, in that point you start to be here and here more. Standing practice is more for your lower physical center. Once you get to the sitting part, the emotional healing on this center starts to open up. Like not metaphorically, I'm talking about literally. You'll start to feel this open up while you're meditating. At that point, more mental and emotional healing will start to happen. I'm going to stop talking here because I don't really know your case well, because I never met you. For me to keep on talking and give you a bunch of qigong theory is actually pretty irresponsible, and I don't want to just show off or babble, right? So I'll stop here, but my main message to you is there is a progression. It's not just swinging in the dark or winging it. If the hardest part for most people is to practice consistently, like I talked about last episode. Lucky for me, because I was a martial artist before I was a full-time qigong guy, the idea of training every day, I've been doing it for 40 years, so it's not new to me, right? But a lot of people never went through that process. So it's something that you should contemplate and consider. To give yourself a chance, you have to kind of practice every day. It doesn't matter if it's qigong or you take the shamanistic path, the mystic path, the praying path. It doesn't matter what it is. Consistency is key, but consistency without self-punishment and forcing. You have to contemplate and take it easy. Just a little bit a day. You don't have to go nuts, right? Anyways, leave your question below and then we can talk about some more if you like. Take care. And then for the rest of the viewers, please leave your question below. So any question on Taoism and Qigong or even internal martial art would be cool. For my program recently, I'm very happy to see all the support. We train once a week in a live stream class. We also have a student library that archives all the past classes that you can binge watch. There's going to be a retreat coming up, and you get an 80% discount if you've been more than a 3-month student. There's also a bunch of features. Just follow the link below in the description. The objective for me is to be able to share this with everybody, and hopefully everyone feels better. Anyways, see you next time, guys.